When my dad called me into his office, I thought it was just another Monday. I'd been working for my parents' company since I was 19. Small marketing agency, family run. Tight-knit. My mom handled clients, my dad managed finances. And I was the one pulling 12-hour days, keeping everything actually running. So when he looked at me with that fake corporate smile and said, "Son, this isn't easy, but we're letting you go," I honestly thought it was a joke. Letting me go? What the hell are you talking about? He sighed, glancing at my mom. Who wouldn't he even look up from her laptop? You know, times are tough. We can't afford to keep everyone. It's business, not personal. I actually laughed, because I was living in a one-bedroom apartment, taking home less than half what I should be paying, and still paying part of their mortgage. You're firing me to save money. I'm your son. Mom finally looked up, her eyes cold. We can't show favoritism. People are talking. It's better this way. They didn't even offer severance. Just a handshake. My dad said, "You'll land on your feet, kid." The next day, they posted a job listing. Same position. New title. Lower salary. I realized then it wasn't about saving money. They wanted control. I'd even suggesting modern marketing strategies, automation, social media, rebranding, things my dad called gimmicks. So I packed my things, walked out of the office. I'd built and promised myself one thing. I'd make them regret ever underestimating me. And I did. Just not the way you'd think that. Losing my job was like losing my identity. For years I was the company. The one who stayed late, fixed client messes, updated the website, pitched new ideas my parents ignored. Suddenly, I was nobody. For the first few weeks I spiraled. I tried applying to other marketing agencies, but every reference came back to my parents, and apparently they weren't shy about saying I was unreliable and difficult to manage. Unreliable, I ran their business, while they took vacations every other month. Difficult because I refused to sugarcoat their incompetence. I remember one night sitting in my dark apartment, staring at my bank account, 3 digits left, and thinking maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't good enough without them. Then my phone buzzed. It was Lavra, one of our ex-clients. She texted, "Hey." I heard what happened. Honestly, your parents were impossible to deal with. Want to grab coffee? I might have an idea. That coffee changed everything. Lavra had left their agency months ago because she couldn't stand my mom-ass attitude. She wanted someone younger, hungrier, and she said, "You were the only one who actually listened." She offered me a small contract, 1 client, 1 month freelance. It wasn't much, but it was something. I worked 18 hours a day, built her campaign from scratch. Did everything I'd been told. Didn't work. Within 3 weeks, her brand engagement exploded. Her sales tripled, word spread. 1 client turned into 3. 3 became 10. Within 6 months, I had a tiny team, all people my parents had mistreated and let go. We worked out of a coffee shop, laptops and pure caffeine. I called it next phase marketing because that's what it was for all of us. And while I was rebuilding from ashes, my parents were unknowingly setting fire to everything they had left. Because when pride runs your business, instead of sense failure, I sent an F. It's a when. About 8 months after I left, I started hearing whispers. Clients were leaving my parents' company, not quietly, but angrily. Missed deadlines, tone-deaf campaigns, overpromised results. It didn't surprise me my dad never adapted. He treated marketing like it was still 2005, while the industry sprinted into the future. My mom, she was too proud to admit they needed change. But the real shock came when one of my new clients, a tech startup, mentioned my parents' company by name. We were considering them, but their reviews online are terrible now. Something about late projects and staff quitting. Curiosity got the best of me. I checked their Glassdoor page. A disaster. Their Yelp full of furious clients. Their social media practically dead. They had become everything I warned them they'd become. Still, a part of me felt weirdly guilty. This was my family. The people who raised me, who once bragged that our son keeps this company running. But then I remembered that moment in the office. My dad's fake smile, my mom's cold silence, and that guilt burned away. Karma was doing her job. But what really hit me was when I ran into one of my parents' old employees. She hugged me like she'd seen a ghost. You heard what happened to your dad's firm. A little why. They lost their biggest client, the one paying half their bills. Apparently, your dad promised results and didn't deliver. The client is suing them. Suing. That night, I poured myself a drink and stared at my laptop. My little company, Next Phase, was thriving, small but solid. My team was loyal. Our clients were happy. Meanwhile, my parents' empire, the one they fired me to protect, was crumbling faster than they could rebuild it. And yet, deep down, I knew they weren't done. My parents were too proud to admit defeat. They'd rather burn everything, including me, before they said we were wrong. I just didn't know they were about to try. Exactly that. It was a random Tuesday when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in almost a year. Dad. For a second, I just stared at it. My first instinct was to decline, but curiosity when I answered. "Hey, son," he said, voice way too casual. "How've you been there?" It was that fake warmth I'd heard my whole life. "I've been busy," I said flatly. "Running my company." He paused. "Yeah, I heard about that Next Phase, right?" "You're doing pretty well." I didn't respond. Then he sighed. "Listen, I want sugar-coated. Things have been rough for us. Couple of bad clients, some staffing issues. Your mother has been under a lot of stress." There it is, I thought. The pitch, so he continued. "We were thinking maybe we could collaborate. Help each other out. Family sticking together." I almost laughed out loud. After firing me, trashing my name, and lying to clients about why I left, now they wanted to collaborate. I asked the only question that mattered. "Why now?" He hesitated. "Because you're talented, and well, it's stupid for us to compete when we could combine our strengths." "Combine?" I repeated. "You mean you want me to save your company?" Silence. Then quietly, "We could really use your help." The nerve. I told him I'd think about it. Not because I actually would, but because I wanted to see how desperate they were. 2 days later, my mom called. Her tone was completely different from his. No warmth, no humility. "You owe us this. We built you. You wouldn't have your business without us." That sentence flipped the switch in me. "I owe you nothing," I said. "You fired me to save money, remember. Consider this payback." She tried to guilt-trip me about family loyalty, about honoring our name. I hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel like the powerless son. I felt like the adult in control. But they weren't done. A week later, I got an email from one of my top clients saying they'd been approached by my parents' firm. And the pitch they made that I was unreliable. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. One of my clients suddenly ghosted me mid-project. Another delayed payments without explanation. Then a third one emailed, saying they were re-evaluating partnerships. It didn't make sense. Everything was going too well for this to happen out of nowhere. Then one of my smaller clients, a local restaurant owner, ID helped rebrand, called me directly. Hey, just wanted to ask, are you okay? Your parents told us you were closing your business because of legal trouble. I nearly dropped my phone. Legal trouble, I repeated. Yeah, they said you got sued for breaching a contract. They even showed an email from someone claiming to be your lawyer. My stomach turned cold. My parents had always been manipulative, but this was a new level. I called my lawyer. No such lawsuit existed. It was all fabricated. That's when it hit me. They weren't trying to collaborate. They were trying to erase me. I started digging. Turns out they'd been contacting several of my clients, spreading lies, saying ID stolen their proprietary data when I left, that ID copied their marketing systems, that working with me could get them blacklisted. They were so desperate to save themselves that they were willing to destroy their own son's livelihood. I confronted them. I called my dad first. Why are you doing this? He sighed. Voice cold. Business is war, son. You made your choice. Business is family when you need me, and war when I succeed. I snapped. He didn't answer. Just hung up. That night, I barely slept. Every part of me wanted revenge. Not petty revenge, but something lasting. I wanted them to feel what they made me feel. But instead of hitting back emotionally, I decided to hit them where it hurt most, their reputation. Over the next month, I doubled down on my work. Networked harder than ever. Started landing mid-sized companies who loved how personal and creative my approach was. I made sure every client who left my parents' firm heard about next phase. And slowly the tide turned. My parents had tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was the seed. It had been about a year since I started next phase. We dig on from 3 people and a coffee shop to a small downtown office with 10 full-time employees. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. The energy, the laughter. The late nights, it felt like family. A real one. And one Friday afternoon, my receptionist buzzed me. There's a couple here asking for you. They say they're your parents. My heart sank. I hadn't seen them in almost a year. Part of me wanted to tell her to say I was out. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me say, send them in. They walked in like they owned the place. My dad looked older, thinner. Eyes dull. My mom still in her perfect blazer. But something about her posture screamed defeat. Nice place, my dad said. Scanning the office. Didn't he realize you'd grown this much? I leaned back in my chair. You would be if you hadn't. He'd been busy spreading lies about me. My mom sighed. We made mistakes, okay? But we're here now because we need your help. There it was, the honesty they'd never shown before, twisted by desperation. Turns out their biggest client, the one they'd stolen from a competitor years ago, had finally pulled out. They were on the brink of bankruptcy. Their employees were quitting weekly. And now, the very investors who once ignored me wanted me. Dad looked at me across the desk, voice breaking just a little. Son, if you just come back, we could rebuild together. We can start over. I looked him dead in the eye. You didn't want a partner. You wanted control. You fired me because I had ideas you couldn't. He understand. And now you want those ideas to save you. Mom tried to play the guilt card. We're still your parents. I stood up. Yeah, and you're the reason. I learned how not to run a business. For a long second, none of us spoke. You could almost feel the years of resentment in the silence. Then I said something I never thought I'd have the courage to say. If you want help at LLB as clients, not family, you will pay full price. No discounts, no favors. My dad stared at me like he didn't. He recognized the person standing in front of him. Then he nodded slowly. Guess we deserve that. They left quietly, and when the door closed behind them, I felt peace, but that peace didn't last long. Because the moment my company started handling their accounts, I found something buried in their files, something that changed everything. When I agreed to take them on as clients, I kept it strictly professional. Signed contracts, fixed rates. No personal talks. My team handled their rebranding, website updates, PR, everything. I didn't deal with them directly unless necessary. But part of the agreement required access to their old campaign files and financial archives. That's when I stumbled across something wrong. One of their former clients, a big local nonprofit, had supposedly terminated their contract years ago. But the invoices told another story. Payments kept coming for 6 months after the contract ended. Same amounts, same time stamps. Except the money didn't go into the company's main account. It went into a secondary account under my mom's name. I double-checked, then triple-checked. It was fraud, blatant, deliberate, and carefully hidden. I didn't want to believe it. My mom had always been cold, manipulative even, but I never thought she'd cross into criminal territory. I called one of my ex-colleagues who used to handle their accounting. She hesitated before saying, "You didn't hear it from me." But yeah, they moved client funds around for years. Your mom said it was temporary liquidity. Your dad pretended not to know. I sat there in my office long after everyone left, the computer screen glowing in the dark. The people who lectured me about ethics, about earning things properly, had been stealing. And worse, they used some of that money to fund the company expansion that later led to my firing. They fired me to protect their lives. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I drove to their house, the same one I helped pay the mortgage on when I was younger. My dad opened the door, clearly surprised. "We need to talk," I said. He tried to deflect at first, then realized I wasn't playing games. When I showed him the documents, his face went pale. "Tell me this isn't real," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Just sat down, head in his hands. "It started years ago. We were desperate. Your mom said it was just until we got back on track." I walked out before he could finish that day. Something inside me broke, not in anger, but in disappointment, so deep it physically hurt. Because I realized the truth. They didn't just fire me to save money. They fired me so I wouldn't see what they done. I slept maybe 3 hours that night. When I woke up the next morning, the house felt smaller, like the walls had closed in with all the secrets they'd been keeping. I made coffee I didn't taste and stared at the stack of documents on my kitchen table like it was a ticking bomb. At first my instincts screamed, "Expose them." Imagine the headline, "Local family firm accused of embezzlement. Son reveals truth." I pictured my parents humiliated, their little empire collapsing, clients marching out the door. I pictured courtrooms and testimony, And finally, after years of them, pretending to be the moral center of the community, the truth laid bare. But the other part of my brain, the part that still remembered scraped knees and birthday cakes, the part that had to wrestle with the word mother and father, sounded a warning. Think about the fallout if I went public. I'd bury them, yes. But I'd also wreck lives. Long-time employees who trusted them, mothers and fathers who lose pensions, clients whose projects would be left in limbo. There were kids on payrolls. There were families who relied on those paychecks. And then there was me if I blew the whistle. The press would dig into everything. They'd find the year I left the messy split, the clients who'd been told I was unreliable. They'd ask why I hadn't acted sooner. I'd be painted as a vengeful son. I'd have to testify. I'd have to watch the people in the photos on their office walls be LED away in handcuffs while reporters shouted over each other for sound bites. I called my lawyer, the same one who told me there was no lawsuit fabricated against me. He was blunt. You have documented evidence of misappropriation. That's felony. But you need to be careful. There are statutes of limitation, chain of custody issues. If anybody accuses you of planting or falsifying documents, things get ugly. He recommended we preserve everything, make copies, and consider contacting the nonprofit, whose funds had been diverted. He also suggested an anonymous tip to the authorities as an option, but that felt cowardly. My team at Next Phase, the people who had become my second family, deserved protection. If I exposed my parents and their company collapsed mid-contract, some of our clients might get dragged in. If I stayed silent, I would carry their sin like a stone in my chest. So I did the only adult thing I could think of. I made a list. Victims, employees, clients, potential evidence, risks, benefits. I slept on it, and the list stared back at me in the morning, jagged and merciless. That afternoon, my mom texted, "Can we meet, please? For the kids." The words "for the kids" landed like a plea and a threat. I walked into our agreed coffee shop holding a folder, not the folder with the documents, but my lawyer's contact a plan. She sat down, eyes swollen, voice low. "We can fix this," she said. "You don't have to ruin us." And I realized she meant it. Not because she suddenly cared about morality, but because she was terrified of losing the thing that validated every compromise she'd ever justified. I looked at her and saw the woman who'd taught me to hide anger behind kindness, who'd taught me to bargain by instinct. I also saw the woman who'd stolen from other people to fund her lifestyle. "Do you want me to help you make it right?" I asked. "Or do you want me to make sure the world knows?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her purse and slid me a single sheet of paper, a ledger entry I hadn't seen before. It had a name I recognized, someone who might blow the whole thing wide open if I showed it to the right person. My hands shook. I realized there was a way to do this that didn't end with screaming headlines, maybe. But doing it would mean I had to become the exact kind of ruthless, calculating person I'd vowed never to be. I folded the ledger into my pocket and walked out of the coffee shop with a decision pressing against my ribs like a fist. I could expose them and end them, or I could use the ledger as leverage, force them to make reparations, quietly save the employees, protect the clients, and keep my name out of the papers. Either option had consequences I couldn't fully predict. I stared at my phone at my teams. Messages about a new client meeting tomorrow, and felt the weight of the ledger like a second heartbeat. I had 24 hours before the nonprofit's board met again. 24 hours to choose. 24 hours passed like a drum roll. I didn't sleep. I paced the office, the ledger folded in my pocket like contraband. My lawyer and I drew up a plan that felt like walking a tightrope. Factual documentation, a clear list of demands, protections for employees and clients, and one non-negotiable clause. If my parents refused, I'd hand everything to the nonprofit and the authorities. No leaks, no theatrics, just the law. When I called my mom that afternoon, she picked up on the second ring. Her voice was measured. "We'll meet. Tell me what you want." I met them at the same neutral cafe where we last talked. Dad's hands trembled when he reached for his coffee. Mom's eyes were wet but fierce. They looked smaller, like their bluster had been shaved away. I laid the ledger on the table between us and watched them blanch. "Hear us what happens next," I said, and I read it, like a contract public apology to the non-profit. And any clients affected, full auditing of the past 5 years with an independent accountant, restitution to the non-profit, and a repayment plan funded by the sale of certain assets, immediate resignation from executive roles, and an agreement to never seek control of the business again, and most importantly, a commitment to protect every employee during the transition severance for those who lost jobs because of their mismanagement, and honor the contracts they designed. I watched their faces as I spoke. My dad's jaw clenched. My mom tried to smile and failed. "If you agree, we keep this private," I continued. "We handle it quietly. You avoid public ruin. The nonprofit gets paid. Employees don't lose their lives over your mistakes. Your clients don't get left in the dark. And no one has to know I was the one who pushed this silence." Then my mom's voice, small, brittle. "We don't have the money." She glanced at my father like she was pleading with him to make the impossible true. "You have assets," I said. "Not everything is liquid, but there are ways. Liquidate a beach house, sell the collector cars. Use the retirement accounts. We'll structure payments so people aren't left with nothing." Dad's eyes found mine. "If we do this, you'll still be involved?" he asked. He sounded like a man bargaining for a reprieve he deserve. "No," I said. "You'll hire a mediator and an auditor. I will oversee the restitution plan as a consultant, only to make sure employees and clients are protected. After that, I walk away." My throat tightened saying those words. Walking away was part of the deal, and maybe the hardest part. They signed not with flourish, but with survival in their strokes. We agreed on timelines, escrow accounts, a short list of employees who would be prioritized for support. I drafted press messaging that would only be used if they violated the agreement. For a week, they moved like people trying to undo a storm. They called the nonprofit board, offered a structured repayment, and agreed to the independent audit. They tendered resignations. They called employees, apologized, and awkward, rehearsed voices, and made good on immediate payments. I watched from the sidelines, coordinating through my lawyer, ensuring their promises weren't empty. Some employees hugged me and whispered thanks. Others avoided my eyes. Angry ID kept quiet instead of publicly exposing them. A few clients said they'd prefer all of it to stay private, fearful of project fallout. My team looked at me with complicated gratitude. We'd save some people, but not everyone would be satisfied. 2 weeks later, despite our careful plan, someone leaked. An anonymous tip reached a reporter at a local paper. The story hinted at financial improprieties and quietly named the nonprofit involved. It wasn't the full scandal I'd feared, but it was enough to make the nonprofit demand an official explanation and the city's ethics board to ask questions. I sat on my office roof that night, ledger in my lap, and realized something ugly. Even the best laid deals don't stop consequences. I'd chosen the path that tried to protect employees and clients, but the fallout was spreading anyway. AITA kept my name out of the headlines for now, but the leak made it clear the truth wanted out. I had made a deal meant to minimize harm, but truth, like water, finds cracks, and now those cracks were starting to show. Months passed. The audit was brutal, exposing years of mismanagement and small-scale embezzlement. My parents paid restitution, resigned from all positions, and the non-profit finally recovered a fraction of what was owed. Employees who'd been at risk were protected. Some even received bonuses from the repayment plan I helped enforce. Clients returned to stability, though a few left permanently. Distrust etched into every interaction. Through it all, I stayed in the shadows. My name never appeared on press reports. My involvement known only to the lawyer, the auditor, and a few key staff. It felt strange, invisible justice or quiet revenge. Sometimes I wondered if it mattered that I didn't get credit. My parents, they were a ghost of what they once were. Dad's pride was broken, Mom's ambition dulled. They moved into a smaller home, liquidated almost everything of value, and quietly tried to rebuild their lives with jobs they could no longer influence. I ran into them once months later at a grocery store. They looked at me with a mixture of shame, relief, and strangely respect. No words were exchanged. Emotionally, I was a mess. I'd gained financial stability, a thriving business, and loyal employees, but the victory felt hollow. Family betrayal leaves scars that money and success can't erase. I thought about forgiveness, but couldn't give it fully. Forgiving didn't feel fair. They gambled with my life, my career, and my reputation. I'd given them a chance to make things right quietly, and they'd chosen compliance over confession, restitution over real humility. Reddit AITA. I protected the innocent, saved my employees and clients, and avoided public humiliation for everyone. I also capitalized on my parents' desperation. I used leverage to make them pay, to ensure their mistakes didn't ruin more lives. But I didn't forgive them emotionally. I didn't restore them to my trust. I used their fear, yes, but for a purpose. I walk into my office now and see my team laughing, the clients happy, the business thriving. And I realized that revenge without reason is cruelty, but revenge with purpose to right wrongs, protect others, and enforce accountability feels different. I didn't ruin my parents. I stopped them from hurting anyone else. So AITA, because sometimes the hardest justice is the one you deliver silently, with your hands clean and your conscience sharp.